Well, it's official. Marcus Davenport is re-signing with the Detroit Lions on a one-year deal. So let's get right into it. So yes, it is officially here, and man, it feels like a Christmas gift. I got to be honest, right? Yesterday we get Derek Barnes re-signing with the Detroit Lions. I'm pumped up about it. I showcased the jersey in the background. Derek Barnes is back as a Lion. I thought it was well-deserved, locking him in for 3 seasons. I was pumped about that move. That was one on both my mock-off seasons. I made the move, and it was really never a consideration not to re-sign Derek Barnes. It was just like, at what price point is this going to be at? And today the Lions turn around, and they've made some other moves outside of this, some smaller moves that we touched on yesterday in the live stream. Also, of course, Zeke Turner is back as well. But they turn around today and bring back Marcus Davenport reportedly on a one-year, $4.75 million deal. And why this has me so excited, you probably all seen the shirt before, but maybe not. We already got the Marcus Davenport merchandise. Now look, this isn't like I have every shirt, so it's like, hey, if Lions re-sign somebody, I'll just pull the shirt out and be like, I got the shirt. Like, no, it's not like that. My man Jordy hooked me up last year, and he was like, yo, I want to hook you up with some, Lions merchandise, basically, and that was awesome. I really appreciate that, and we ended up going with 2 players. We went with Sione Vaki, who I'm a huge fan of. I love wearing that shirt. I think he's going to pop in the future. It was also Marcus Davenport, and it wasn't like I was just picking a random player. It's because I really believed in what the player could become, and he was signing a prove-it deal last year with the Lions. It was reported 1 year, $6.5 million. There was also a void year on this year when he was set to become a free agent. So keep that in mind too, that now it kind of gets overlapped back into the new deal. So there is that. Like, he was kind of technically under contract. He just wasn't going to be here until now that he gets re-signed with the Lions. So this was a guy that I had really believed in at the time when the Lions initially decided to sign from the Minnesota Vikings. That missed the majority of the Minnesota Vikings season. Didn't love the way that he was being asked to play in that year. Now, we did a little bit with us as well, in fairness, but he was playing a lot in that stand-up role. They were kind of moving him around up and down the line of scrimmage, and that's a value that he had. I did a full breakdown. I won't go into that all here, but I like this hand in the dirt, but there still is a flexibility, but he was like the perfect opposite of Aiden Hutchinson, right? He was the big, physical pocket collapser, and he was an athlete. The guy can move sideline to sideline. He had tons of range as well. He'd play the run, and he was tough as heck. However, he's had a ton of injuries. So the Lions are able to bring him in at a very reasonable price on a prove-it deal because of the injuries for a guy that over his span with the New Orleans Saints, it wasn't about what he was on the field. It was about when he was on the field, because when he was on the field, he was incredibly productive. I thought there was a case that he was, on paper, the best number 2 edge rusher in football when on the field. In terms of pass rush rates, the percentages that he was putting out year after year after year, over 10%, this guy could get after the quarterback at a very high rate. It was just simply about, is he going to be healthy to get on the field? And then, of course, we see him with the Lions. He plays a few games, only plays 89 snaps this past season. We see him against the LA Rams, and he looks fantastic. 6 pressures in that game. He looked like the perfect opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. We had something. It was going to connect. It made so much sense. I was fired up. And then, unfortunately, a couple weeks later, you go to Arizona, and he gets injured in the Arizona game. And it knocks him out for the season with the triceps injury. Now, this is something that we kind of did a breakdown on. You could definitely go check it out in more detail back during the season when it was officially announced that he was going to be out for the year. Marcus Davenport having that tricep injury, you could essentially just see his arm give out. I mean, it was chopped down by the offensive tackle. You could see it kind of give out on him, goes off the field, ends up coming back on the field with the sleeve on. So you knew something was messed up. And he played a few snaps after that. Like, he tried to finish the game, but you could tell he wasn't even using his left arm. I mean, he was just ducking his arm and using his right hand. And I appreciated that so much from a fan of man, he's trying. This dude wants to get out there. He wants to play. He knows it's a prove it type of deal, right? He's fighting for that, but it's the effort that he's giving to the team. And I said something similar with Derek Barnes yesterday. Derek Barnes had his injury, and for him, it wasn't about the new contract. It was about rehab and trying to get back and find a way to get back for the season. Marcus Davenport was fighting to stay on the field when clearly this dude was not healthy at all. And unfortunately, he gets knocked out for the year. Clearly the biggest concern with Marcus Davenport. There's no way around it. And the Lions have done things like this before. Last year, they brought back Emmanuel Mosley after missing an entire season after having an injury history. But I think the difference is notable with these two. Now, obviously, there's just a plethora of injuries here with Marcus Davenport. Unfortunately, it feels like that's tied to him until it's not. It just is what it is. But that being said, we have seen him put together 11, 12 game types of seasons. And if you look at Davenport's injury, that tricep injury hasn't been the thing that's consistently kept him out of seasons. I mean, it was an ankle injury with Minnesota. It's been a foot injury in the past. It's been a shoulder injury in the past. To at least that extent, it gives you a little bit more calmness when you think about re-signing Marcus Davenport. Also, when you get to the financial aspect, reportedly up to $4.75 million. If we just take that number, forget the void year, $4.75 million for guys what they were projected to get this offseason in the edge market. that's a very, very great price. I mean, for his production, for what he can be, but it's also still a very reasonable price, even with the injuries. Like, there's a reason he signed to such a big prove it deal with Minnesota and still signed to a pretty nice prove it deal for us last year. We had to throw a void here on it with $6.5 million because of how talented he is just when he's on the field. And if you think about the other guys that were going to be available this offseason, a couple that I had noted that I'm pretty familiar with, about that kind of price point of $4.75 million, Baron Browning was projected to get 1 year, $6 million. I like Baron Browning, but he's not the same style at all. There's a certain style the Lions are looking for. They like the big, physical pocket collapsers opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. Obviously, this is a former first-round pick out of UTSA. He has that kind of upside, and he's shown that on the field, but that's the kind of style that they're looking for. Two coaches were under Dave Aranda. They both came from the same spots. The one overlap we have, and they're both now here. So now he's talking about this umbrella style, which he explains as a gap and a half style, which is you have a primary and a secondary, as we know. So defense lineman has an A, presses into the opposite A, or he presses into the B. That's the same look as what the Lions have done. So that's similar. They're coming from the exact same tree. And then we can even look at it from personnel. Length on the inside, or lift on the inside, length on the outside. I mean, if you want to just say, if you were trying to guess what kind of D lineman Lions would go after, they've always valued length. Think about Lake on the edge. That's where, when Marcus Davenport was brought up, I'm like, well, let's not forget, like, he was a long edge defender, especially if Levi doesn't come back. That's another thing that I'd throw in to be kind of that big defensive end, your strong side defensive end. When you think about Browning, it's a very different type, limitations to his game. And, we saw him get traded last season. And then if you go to guys that could be similar to Davenport, I think of like a DeMarcus Lawrence, who maybe could be in somewhat of a similar range price-wise, probably a little bit more still, but he's coming off a very down season. And obviously there's not really a future outlook there. It's truly just a one-year deal, and you're hoping that he has something to give towards the end of his career. Think of a guy like Joseph Osai, who I had in our mock offseason signing with the Lions, right? Who would be probably a little bit of a cheaper contract. And he had production this past season, but from an efficiency perspective, it was nowhere near showing the ceiling of what Marcus Davenport has showed his ceiling to be in the NFL. So the Lions have done this before, and it was never something I thought like for sure was going to happen. I didn't bring him back in either of my mock off seasons. I never really even considered it that heavily, but I should have, because this is, of course, the kind of style that the Lions are looking for. And also the way that he went out with the Lions wasn't on some bad note. It wasn't like he gave up. The dude was fighting his tail off to be on the field, and he looked really good when he was out there. It was just such a limited sample size to grab onto because of the injury. It doesn't close off the tap of like, oh, now we can't go add another edge rusher. You can do it in free agency and the draft, right? Especially in the draft, because you're just trying to take best player available. But now he pairs back up with Josh Paschal, and you have a guy that brings a lot more pass rush upside now in Davenport that can rush from the inside, as we saw this past season, and kind of fill into the same role. And I think it still leaves a window for Zadarius Smith to be on this roster, because Zadarius is not physically the style that Marcus Davenport is, especially as kind of just a pocket pusher, especially as a force at the point of attack, as a run defender where he's just jolting guys backwards. He's not that. He's more of a pure pass rusher that, again, I really like when he's on the interior. We saw that last season. The Lions like that as well.
Well, I do find a real value in, you're bringing this guy in. If he connects this year, you have a potential steal, because a guy with this kind of upside should not be at this price in free agency. It's just because of the injuries. But there also is still the opening where if he did play well, he could potentially be a long-term piece for the Lions. I thought Davenport would become that. I was sticking to that when we signed him. I thought he's going to be a long-term piece. Well, we're going on to year 2 now with Davenport, even though he didn't play last season. But that door is still open. Zadarius isn't a long-term piece, even if he is here this season. You can even look at it like this. Charles Harris was given a $1.75 million deal in 2021, who essentially had no production, but was the first-round pick on a prove-it deal for the Lions. Now, he ultimately got extended off of that. And at that time, the salary cap number around the NFL, not for the Lions, was set at about $182 million, which meant that he was just under 1% of the NFL salary cap that season. And now Marcus Davenport, if we take the full number of $4.75 million, and again, the contract is up to, so that's not like, hey, this is absolutely his cap number this season. It could be much lower than that. Even if we took that number, it's still only 1.7% of what the salary cap is set to be for 2025.
What Davenport showcased is his ability to align in multiple spots and have success as a pass rusher. So this could mean that the Lions could cut Zadarius Smith at this point now, and they could essentially take that money that they save, and it could be just this contract. But I don't think it has to be that. I don't think it makes it one or the other because you bring Davenport back. So today, for the 28-year-old defensive end, I went back and watched some Davenport from this past season, and I was still walked away like, I get it. based on his play, I absolutely get it, right? You go to the first game, even the Arizona game where he didn't have the same production. I mean, he only played 89 snaps this past year. He put up 7 pressures in those 89 snaps. Things showcase that you were hoping that would showcase the upper body strength, the force at the point of attack as a run defender, obviously the length that he brings to the table, which the Lions always love is length, the flexibility in terms of alignment. He was a smart player. He had that ability to rush from either end, right? He could play stand up, put his hand in the dirt. He could rush with either foot forward. He was comfortable in both of those spots. Again, I liked him a little bit more with his hand in the dirt, but the Lions used him all over the place. He was dominant as a 7 technique because he still had the lateral range, as we've seen sideline to sideline. He could chase guys down, but he also was just a handful. Tight ends couldn't handle him in line at the point of attack, so it allowed him to work over gaps, and he showcased enough agility to be successful in those 7 technique roles. And then he could kick even further inside on pass downs if you wanted him to, but he could also kick out wide and be a stand-up 9 technique and rush off the edge, and he showed a variety of ways to win. It wasn't like there was only one way that he could win and that was it, and that's how he won as a pass rusher. There was a multitude of ways that he could win. It brings more variety than what I think we've seen from a guy like Josh Paschal, because as much as he's this big, forceful pass rusher, that's this big effort guy that has a ton of length to finish and closing speed and closing range, he also showed the ability to flatten the edge. He showed the ability to win outside as a pass rusher. And to me, that came back to the angles that he took, entry, which were incredibly effective. It showed up to the ability to really maintain speed when working around the arc. There was a burst to his game. He changed that pace on a dime, create some real suddenness. And again, it always came back to the angles that he approached with. Now, I definitely had some knocks with him, and I think some of those are just going to be what they are. Like, for example, his body control could get a little bit thrown off. I thought especially when working through some of the tighter traffic, he plays a little bit more upright, which is part of the reason for that, right? He's not naturally just kind of settling himself down. He's a very big defensive end, so he plays a little bit more of an upright style. You'll see as a run defender and as a pass rusher. Sometimes it slows down his bull rush because he can get lashed inside, and if he is, it can really kind of slow things down. Some of the reactive athleticism to like stack and shed, create a ton of range, to enter and then also make a play, that could be a little bit of an issue, right? More so just kind of being like, hey, I'm going to push my guy backwards and I'm going to try to force this thing back inside. But the effort was always there. We saw the football intelligence, I think, on display this past year. Some of the discipline, the way that he worked into the flats to play against the Rams, I loved, right? Where he gets out to the flat and Stafford has to throw it over Davenport and he's so long that the pass is incomplete. Like, I don't think he did anything on the field. He had the ability to sustain, run his feet through contact, the speed to power pace, as I touched on. I don't think that there was anything on the field that it was like, oh, this is just not going to work. It was just simply about the injury. And I think the way that he went out really matters here with Davenport, because he went out fighting to be on the field. And I think that matters. I'm fired up because I get to continue rocking this shirt and it makes sense. And I'm also just excited for the real aspect of Marcus Davenport. I think ceiling is still super high. It's perfectly with Aiden Hudson. He fits perfectly in with what the Lions want to do. I think for Casey Rogers, who I think values flexibility with defensive linemen, that values length, right? We did the video, and if you didn't see it, go check it out. We did the coaching video, react to the coaching staff. And if you missed that, it's because we were talking about the assistant coaches. But that matters because 2 of our new defensive assistant coaches, both are coming from the same tree. They both worked under now Baylor's head coach, and their mentality for the defensive line was, on the edge, we want length. In the inside, we want to create an umbrella, which is that ability to play a gap and a half style, to press into another gap, which is what the Lions do. Their approach defensively, and then obviously went into everything else, like in terms of the players on the field having that control, right? That they're the leaders on the field. It's not coming from a check with me on the sideline. We went through that on a video, but Marcus Davenport also fits the prototype of that defense. He's got a ton of length on the edge. He's flexible up front. He can play a gap and a half. And he fits perfectly opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. So to me, getting Marcus Davenport back, as much as I didn't maybe assume this was going to happen, excited this happened. Now, we don't have the full details here yet, but especially if more of this is incentives, it's even better. But I completely understand it. I'm not mad at this whatsoever. And I think if you were just going to take $4.7 million and say, we'll just take that and spend it on just a different free agent as a defensive end, there's a good chance you're not getting a productive player that's going to find much of the field. Davenport's capable of getting on the field. Davenport's capable of being a starter, as we saw last year. It's just, is he going to be on the field? And that's the real question that, unfortunately, we can't really answer right now. But hopefully he can. As you start getting to the guys like that are this style and that also, are going to be like a true upgraded defensive end, now you're getting to the $15+ million per range. All right. There's just a gap. There's defensive ends get paid, edge rushers get paid. I think Levi may get paid a ton this offseason. Those guys get paid that are proven. And the only reason Davenport's at this price point is because of the multitude of injuries that have really over the last few seasons just cut him to basically no season. But we know what he's capable of, even in that small amount of time. And I'm excited to see it again. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, man. Welcome back, Marcus Davenport. Excited to have you back. And I'm out.